Welcome back to Takeout. Today marks 3 years since the start of the civil war in Sudan, which has created what can only be described as a catastrophic humanitarian crisis. Earlier, I spoke with Tjada McKenna, CEO of Mercy Corps, who has been assisting as best it can in the region. Please take a listen. Tjada, the numbers I'm going to read here boggle the mind. They come from the International Rescue Committee. 14 million internally displaced in Sudan, 28.9 million in active acute food insecurity, 150,000 dead, more than 3,000 dead from cholera. Help my audience understand what those numbers mean and the human cost of this conflict, now 3 years old, going into year 4.
Yeah. So as we enter the 4th year of this conflict, where we have seen a lot of attacks on civilian infrastructure, you basically have people left with systems that they need to sustain life, like food systems, markets, healthcare, water. Those systems have functionally collapsed for people. This is still a market-driven economy, and things have become very expensive. In terms of the numbers of people who are food insecure, this war has turned a lot of agricultural land into battlegrounds. It's disrupted the planting seasons, the input of seeds. We're facing a season now with limited fertilizer use. My staff, which, relatively well off, compared to their peers with jobs, have told me that many of them in some regions are only eating 1 meal a day. It's not because they can't afford the food. It's either that they can't access it, or you're waiting in line for 3 hours just to get that meal. So they've trained their family to eat 1 meal a day. So these are people who are surviving, but with very limited infrastructure to really sustain and thrive in life.
And Tjada, as I understand it, even venturing to a market or venturing to places that bring food to a market can be incredibly dangerous for people caught in the crossfire.
Yes, exactly. There's still that I talked to a woman who talked about leaving her children at home and going through gunfire to go access food for people. And this is someone who was still living in an abandoned school building with her children. So especially for people in active conflict zones, the disruption is just immense, and it's quite dangerous to move around.
You're in the region. Those you work with are in the region. You have firsthand accounts of these difficulties, yes?
Yes. Firsthand from our staff and from participants in programs. Someone was telling me that she walked 32 days from when she was moved from her home. People have had to move several times as the front lines of conflicts have moved. A gentleman I met today said he was left behind to work, and he came to an area in Sudan to do work, and he's the one that was sent to do the work so that he could send money back. So you see a lot of cases where men have had to leave their families or have been designated as the person to go off and earn money. And as I said, the food issue is quite real in terms of availability and skyrocketing prices. And of course, the war in the Middle East has made that worse just in the last 2 weeks. Fuel prices are up 34%. And so people are feeling the impacts of that day to day in their life.
Tjada, as I understand it, there's the food component, scarcity, danger obtaining it, but also women and young girls are at another level of great vulnerable risk.
Yes. Unfortunately, this is a conflict where we have seen a lot of gender-based violence. Like I said, civilian infrastructure has been really impaired. And the other thing that people need is we need access to safe humanitarian access for people in need of it and for those of us who provide it. And that's been one of the great tragedies of this war is the disproportionate impact on women and children and girls.
A year ago, there was quite a bit of conversation here in Washington about reductions to U.S. Agency for International Development Assistance. That's occurred. There's less of it than there was 1 fiscal year ago. Has that made things more difficult on the ground in Sudan?
That has made things much more difficult on the ground in Sudan. That the cuts that came a year ago were felt immediately. Compounded by that, after the U.S. made its cuts, we have also seen some cuts from several European donors as they redirect that aid money towards their own defense spending. This is coming at a time, the humanitarian system is really under severe stress, not just with aid cuts, but certain systems and supply chains were upended in the way that it was cut. And so now, on top of this, you have this convergence of crises, including a brand new war in the Middle East, where we have more people in need around the world than ever before, and dealing with the least amount of resources that we've had to deal with in a while. And sadly, it does feel like we're entering this age of indifference where we are we're allowing civilians to suffer in these contexts for up to 4 years with no funding and no support and no real pressure to resolve the issue.
Tjada McKenna, CEO of Mercy Corps. We'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.